especially our healthcare workers. And I do believe that you have harvested a lot from this course. And I would like to welcome more friends to scan this QR code and to sign in for this online course. And I would like to come back to this theme. So this is new technology in the promotion of public health. We would base on our previous lectures to discuss further on the development frontiers of drug and vaccine development, and it's the use of new technology in the public health. And we also have a lot of lecturers, and we'd like to thank them. Next slide. These are our previous lecturers. I would like to thank them. And I would like to also thank our partners for their support and sponsorship. And today, we're very honored to have with us all our panel guests to join our panels. Our first panel is the frontiers of drug and technology. It's approximately 1 o'clock. And as you can see on the slides, we have 5 panel guests. On our second panel, we will discuss the applications of new technologies, and we'll have 7 guests with us on this board. So with limited time, we wouldn't be having a QA session online, yet we welcome any questions in the discussion session, and later we can answer your questions individually. So now we will enter our first panel, the development frontier of drug and technology. First of all, I would like to invite Professor Wang Jinsong. He's the moderator of this panel. He is the director of the Institute of Macromolecular Medicine in Jiangsu Industrial Technology Research Institute, and also the chairman of China Advisory Committee of DIA.
好，谢谢刘博士。
Thank you,
非常高兴
Professor
今天
Liu.
有
Dr.
这么一
Liu,
个
I'm
环
very
节，
honored
在
to
非常
have
特殊的一
this
个
to
长假
participate
假期，
in this
和
panel
各位呢
and
一
also
起
during
参加
this
中国国际公共卫生管理
National
的培
Labor Day
训。
holiday to join
今
you
天的主
this
题呢，
public
主要
health
是
management
用科技促
course.
进公共健康，
Our today's
主要
topic
的
would be
方向
how
呢
to
是
use new
药物和科技
technology
的前沿，
in
在这
promotion of
次
public health,
公
and
共
we
卫
will
生
focus
实
on the
践当中的
drug
作
and
用。
technology
今天呢
in
也非常荣幸邀请
COVID-19 and
到
the
国
public
际国
health
内
in
顶
this
级的专
panel.
家， 和
We're
大
very
家一起
honored
分
to
享
have
药物和科
experts
技
from
应
domestic
在这
and
场全球
abroad
公共卫生
to
实践当
discuss
中
how we
取
are
得的进展和机会。
using the new
也非常高兴
technology
呢，
in the
请到
COVID-19
了今
and
天
in the promotion of
在
public
参加的几
health.
位嘉宾，
I'm very
从不同的
honored
角
to
度给
invite
各位
all
分
these
享
guests
药
in
物、科
panel
技
to
还有
discuss
我们
in
的公共
different
卫生实践。 今
perspectives.
天参加我们这
Today
这
on
个
this
主题
panel,
研讨的呢，
we
有4
have
位专
with
家。
us
我先首先介绍呢，
4 experts.
是中山大学
First
肿
of
瘤防
all,
治中心
from
院长、
the
所长，
Sun
国
Yat-sen
家新
University
药抗肿
Cancer
瘤药
Center
临床试验中心
Dean
主任
徐瑞华
院长。 徐院长，要不简单介绍您自己？ 我想您已经
Dr.
是国
Xu
际
Ruihua,
顶级的
would you
临
like
床与
to
科研专
introduce
家，有很
yourself?
多的经
You
验，
are
就是
top
简单介绍一下，
clinicians
这样
and
各位呢也
scientific
能
researcher.
知道您这个声音。
You can introduce yourself briefly. Sorry, I cannot hear him.
院长，可能调整一下，
You can
信号不是
unmute
太好，
yourself.
您那边。
I cannot hear the speaker. Wait for a moment.
要不这我们这个继续，然后让徐
Okay,
院长
let's
调整一
move
下那
on.
边
And
信
Dr.
号， 我
Xu,
们
you
再
can
回到
adjust
徐
for
院
a
长这
second
边。
also. I
那
will
下一位
get
嘉
back
宾
to
呢
you.
是我们的
Our
清华大
next
学药学
speaker
院院长，
would be the Dean
全
and
球健康
Bayer
药物研发中心
Distinguished
主任
Professor of
丁
School
胜
of
院长。
Pharmaceutical
丁院
Science
长，请您
from
简
Tsinghua
单介绍一
University,
下您自己。
Dr. Ding Sheng. Please introduce yourselves. Well, currently, I am the Dean of the School of Pharmaceutical Science in Tsinghua University, and also I'm responsible for the Global Health Drug Development Center in the sponsorship of the Gates Foundation. My specialty mainly focus on how to develop drugs and also stem cell research. And also in Tsinghua University, we have this Global Health Drug Development Center. We have a lot of colleagues who conducted a lot of specific COVID-19 specific researches regarding this outbreak.
好，谢谢丁院长。
Thank you.
下一位嘉宾呢
Professor
是
Ding.
复旦大学病
And
原
also
微
next
生
speaker
物研究
is
所
from
所
the
长
Institute of Epidemic
估计知名的专家呢
Microbiology from
江
Fudan
世博所长
University.
江所
Is
长，
very
请您
famous
简单介绍一
Dr.
下自己。
Jiang Shibo. I am Jiang Shibo. I originally worked in the New York Hematology Center for 20 years, and in 2011, I returned to China to work for the Fudan University, and I worked for the basic research of medicine and also the pathogenic microbiology institute. My expertise focus in the anti-HIV and anti-coronavirus medicine development. Since 2003, I conducted some SARS and MERS-related researches. We focus on the anti-coronavirus polygenic medicine, and also we have discovered some polypeptide medicine for antiretroviral therapy, and this also translated to some clinical application. And since 2003, we have been conducting polypeptide medicine for anti-coronavirus use. And this is a very cutting edge research field. And this is the target is very conservative, majorly on the conservative region of S2 protein. And they have a very similarity among coronavirus strains. So this is a very good target for coronavirus. This is what we have always been
好的，谢
conducting.
谢。我们下面
Thank
会
you.
倾
We'll
听您
go back
在
to
这方面的
you
更详
later
尽的
for
分享。
specific
那我们现在
details
再回
on
到
this.
徐院长这边，
Now we'll
徐院
go
长您
back
那边
to Dr. Xu
这个
Ruihua.
是不是可以？
How's everything now? Can you hear me?
声音比较弱，您是不是靠近
You
话
have
筒？
faint voice. You may need to
哎，对。
get closer to the mic. How about now? Am I
声音
better?
还是比较小。
We still have a very faint voice. I'll move to the maximum.
好的，那我们继续专家介绍，一会儿我
I
们
will
再讨论
introduce
具体的
our
环节的时候，
last
再请
guests,
徐院长再进一步介绍
and
您这
later
边
we'll
的
get back to
工
Dr.
作
Xu.
和背景。我们另外一个专家呢
Our
是我们
fourth
的国际
speaker on
专
the panel
家，
today
是 Access
is
健康国际
an
董事长
international
及主席，
expert. He's the chair of the
前哈佛
president
医
of
学和
Access
哈佛大
Health
学公共卫生
International
学院的教
President
授，
of US-China
人
Health
类基因组
Summit.
科学股份有限公司的创始人，也
And
是中美健康峰
he's
会美方主
also
席 William Hasseltine 博士 ，Dr. Hasseltine。
Dr. William Hasseltine.
Just if you could brief self-introduction.
No, I think you just ask questions, please.
All right, we can do that. 大家知道是在最近几个月来，在全中国，在全世界，对面对疫情，工业界和学术界一起迅速启动了多方面的、多手段、多方向的对于如何预防、治疗、诊断这个冠状病毒 COVID-19 的各项工作，在多个跑道上加速前进。在药物方面呢，在诊断方面都有从小分子到大分子到抗体形成产生血浆产生抗体的一些收集。
molecule
甚至呢，还
antibodies
有一些
for
其他的先进的技术应
serum
用在里面。
treatment.
所以我
We have
想
been doing a
从
lot, and also new
各位专家
technologies
不同的
are
角度呢，
applied. So
对
I would like
于
to invite all of
对于
you
针对
to
新冠病
discuss
毒
on
的
different
药物开
perspectives
发，比如说还有包括甚
regarding
至
the
包括
drug
疫苗，还有
development
其
for
他手段，
COVID-19,
包括基
including
因，包括诊断，
vaccination, and
在全
also
球范围
some
内
the
给
new
各位
technology
进行分
application
享，
in
在
the
哪些方面我们
diagnosis.
目前
You
取得
can
了
share your
阶段性的
experience
成果，
and
哪些呢
in
还
which
有
field
呢
we have
一
gained
些
some
挑战，
progress and in which
在
field
我
we
们
still
应
are
该
facing
作为
challenges.
医务工作者，还有做做
And
社会，
on
怎
behalf
么
of
期待
healthcare
在
workers
这
or
些
on
里面
behalf of
呢
the society,
对解决新
how
冠
do
病
we
毒
expect
起到实质
progresses
性的
in
作
these
用。
fields
因为在
regarding
这方面呢，丁院长也这
containing
刚
the
介绍了，
COVID-19
从药物到
outbreak?
诊断，
And
您这边呢都有
Dr.
您自
Jiang has
己还有同
introduced
事都
some
做这
of
方面
your
工作，
work in this
希望
field,
您开
and
始
also
给大
we
家
would
做
like
个
to
分享。
invite you first to share with us. Okay, I'm Dr. Ding Sheng. I would like to introduce you briefly. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, in China, our scientific researchers and researchers all over the world, we are tackling this outbreak at first time immediately. Firstly, we're trying to search previous existing drugs for its an indication in the coronavirus infection. In the past 2 to 3 months, we have been trying to finding out similarities with previously outbreak coronavirus. If they have similar infection mechanisms, we try to dig existing informations and similarities to develop potential medications and to launch clinical trials for their off-label use in the coronavirus. So in this field, we have been using several drugs, and we are using mainly 3 mechanisms. The first mechanism is against the virus infecting the host. For example, the chloroquine and abidor, they are mainly inhibiting the virus from entering the host cell, and we have entering some the cell organs inside the cell, and also within the we have proteinase inhibitor and RBRP inhibitor. This is RBRP and RNase, polyRNase. So this is regarding the virus entering the cell. These are existing drugs. We have tried several existing drugs and to test for its the clinical efficacy. For example, the remdesivir. This drug, we were expecting a lot from remdesivir, but later and FDA approved for the emergency use of remdesivir, although its clinical efficacy is limited, but it's still an effort. And in the past several months, we have a lot of, I think, a dozen of existing drugs be used in the clinical trials, and they have limited efficacy on the coronavirus, but we still need more clinical data, which will be released later. So this is actually our use of existing drugs against coronavirus. And our second mechanism is to harvest convalescent plasma from recovered patients. So this is another way of new medicine development. We need more time. And I think we are in a preclinical IND enabling phase, the IND phase. And hopefully around summer, it would enter clinical research, and later if it proves efficient in the treatment, maybe it can be approved for emergency use. But we still are looking out for vaccine development. And around the world, I believe there are 100 pharmaceutical teams trying to develop the vaccine. And we have several vaccines entering the clinical trials. Of course, the development of vaccine can ultimately contain the COVID-19 outbreak and will give us the herd immunity and will bring us back to our normal life because it has a protection value to the general population, but it takes a lot of time. And we are also faced with a lot of challenges because as the COVID-19 outbreaks is contained in many places. For example, in China, it will be harder to conduct efficacy tests in China because we don't have no more new infections. Yeah, that's my sharing.
谢谢狄院长，非常全面的从多个
That's very
角度
overall,
来
and
一个非常
you have
高度的一个
introduced
总结
several
概括。
mechanisms.
江处长，刚才您提到过您在这方
And
面在冠状
also,
病毒方
Dr.
面
Jiang,
所
you
做的
have
工作，
mentioned your
结合
work
这一
in the
次
coronavirus.
COVID-19， 您给我们分
Regarding
享一下
COVID-19,
在新
can you
的
share
情
with
况下，
us under
有
these
些
new
更
circumstances
新的进展， 在这个方面，
what are the progresses
非
are we
常
making
希望能听
now?
到您在
We would like
这
to
边
hear from
的分
you,
享。
Dr. Jiang. Thank you. I'm Jiang Shibo, and I have been conducting drug research against coronavirus for 17 years. I have a lot of experience. Regarding the COVID-19, I think we have been repeating the SARS experience all over again 30 years ago. So for this COVID-19, because it's a pandemic, it's much more severe than SARS. It has a very high transmission rate and a mortality rate. We have different strategies for it. So at this time, we first are exploring existing drugs for its off-label use. And maybe we can use it rapidly in clinical trials, because as long as we find something of existing drugs has proved efficacy in the lab, we can put it into the clinical trial. This is a very good direction. But we haven't learned from the SARS in 2003, because 17 years ago, when SARS emerged, we have doing a lot of research. But when SARS is gone, we stopped the research completely. So for the 17 years, we should have been developing some broad-spectrum medications against the coronavirus family. If we have done so, we wouldn't be faced with COVID-19 outbreak. And also, the WHO has mentioned that there is a lecture which mentioned that there's a future epidemic again. And there are experts who predicted that the bat might transmit coronavirus to human, but it surprised us how different the COVID-19 is different from SARS. But if we had done this research in the broad spectrum anti-coronavirus research, we shouldn't be this passive. So after COVID-19, I think we should invest more into the anti-coronavirus treatment. And the government, the foundations, and the pharmaceutical companies can support long-term strategic research against coronavirus. And also the innovation drugs, we need more green channels and more support for it. I've been doing broad spectrum anti-coronavirus treatment using the polypeptide. We have very good antiviral activity, which is very potent around the world, and is more potent than remdesivir and chloroquine, even 100 times higher. This is broad spectrum and also can target many coronavirus strains, including the SARS-CoV-2, the SARS, and the MERS. These are all effective. And also, it's effective for 3 coronavirus from bat. If this polypeptide can be used in the clinical setting, a lot of questions would be solved. And also, the characteristics of polypeptide medicines, this is very safe. It has a highly safe profile. Because it is not a small molecule compound, it's much safer and it's much easier to produce. And in domestic and overseas factories, we have a dozen of pharmaceutical companies who are capable of producing a large quantity of polypeptide. And also, its application is relatively safe. We can apply locally, also for the prevention of coronavirus infection. And we can use the inhalation or nebulizing way to administer this drug, because it can go into the surface of alveolar, and we do not need a systemic usage. We only need local application of this polypeptide, and it will be very effective in the respiratory tract, where the virus is the most rampant. And so we think nebulizing inhalation is very safe, and it will cause less adverse effects or systemic reaction. And also, if we can decrease the local concentration of the local viral load, it will be benefiting later phases of disease development. And also, when after we decrease the viral load, it can decrease its infection rate to the health workers and family members.
Therefore, this is a good to study its levels in the ICU. Mostly the levels are in 1 milliliter. The optimal levels are 130 micromilliliters. This is still in the early phases, because people are asking if this drug can reach the market in 3 months, but the FDA cannot accept a new medication in 3 months. This is a barrier for innovative drugs. So another path that we are doing is using older drugs, but they are non-specific. They are not specifically targeting viruses. Remdesivir is the one which we have the most hope for, because it was used for coronaviruses such as MERS and SARS, but it was not a very effective drug. But at least we know that it targets coronavirus. Other drugs, however, for example, chloroquine, it is not it has certain side effects. So we prefer drugs that target viruses and not human proteins. So drugs such as chloroquine, we see that it has very complicated effects. It has effects on RDRP and is not specifically targeting coronavirus. This results in poor efficacy.
打断一下，听起来就是多肽是一个很重要的方面，但是还有一些挑战。刚才提及到要新用，还有一些刚才其他的方式，田院长也提及，所以有多种的方式。目前来说呢，也是处在探索中推进阶段。但是我们也很希望，不管是一种和一个，最后可能是多种方法，能够解决我们目前非常巨大的挑战。
way to solve this problem.
非常感谢。我的下一个呢，就是问一下我们的哈斯坦博士，在目前针对 COVID-19 的过程当中，是一个全球的努力和共同的合作，在很多方面推进到跨国工业界和学术界的合作。在这方面呢，我想听听哈斯坦博士在这方面的一些经验和体会。
And I wish you to share some of your experience in this area.
Well, as we all know, this is a global pandemic. It requires a global response. Unfortunately, that's been interfered with by geopolitical considerations. What I see is that there's an enormous effort around the world from many laboratories, regardless of where they are, to understand this virus, to develop the diagnostic tests, the treatments, and the vaccines that we need to stop it. We are many months away from having effective drugs. We are many months, even many months away from having vaccines that can stop it. In the meantime, the lessons that we see for countries like China and South Korea that have managed to control the epidemic need to be incorporated, need to be understood, and need to be replicated in other countries that wish to do the same thing. What we see instead is each country taking their own particular path toward control of the epidemic. In some countries, like New Zealand, that seems to work. In other countries, bigger countries, that is working poorly at best. What we have done, instead of climbing up a sharp mountain and climbing down the other side quickly, is we have ascended to a plateau which slowly slopes down rather than comes down sharply. And the question is, how long will that downslope be in many of these countries, particularly as the population becomes very resistant to long-term lockdown measures. So in the absence, and I have to say we are still in the almost total absence of any drug which is effectively stopping this virus replication, and we are still further from vaccines, we can only rely on social control. And social control in many countries, my own included, is loose at best. That means that unless this virus decides to disappear on its own, which I think one doubts because of the history of the cold coronaviruses, we're in for a very prolonged global problem. As I said to the friends and group that was here before, as long as one person in the world remains infected, we are all at risk. After all, we have to realize that this entire problem started when one human being was infected, just one. It takes one person in a city, it takes one person in a country, it takes one person in the whole world. This is a truly global problem that we're facing. I would say there's another issue, and that is when I look at the literature as it comes out, and one thing that is encouraging in this epidemic is how rapidly people are posting their data. But that data isn't incorporated into policy as it should be. Data from some countries is ignored and other countries is emphasized, despite the fact that we know as scientists that one person's data from one country is as good as another person's data from another country. And I think it's time to have a group of international scientists that have no interest in the, no financial interest in the outcome of these trials, be a resource that everyone can look to say, what should we be paying attention to and what is unsubstantiated hype? Because there is a tremendous amount of unsubstantiated hype of one method or another method at this point to treat or to prevent this disease. I won't go into the specifics, but I think we all know what I'm talking about, whether it is the indigenous medicines of one country, whether it's an off-the-shelf medicine that comes from another country, whether it's a clinical result which is ignored by one country and emphasized by another. There's a lot of issues. This is not something to fool around with. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of human lives. And so I would urge a commission set up perhaps by the United Nations, perhaps by the World Health Organization, to serve as an ombudsman for understanding the relevance of various clinical findings. And that group should be experienced and should be critical. I hope that that is something that we can all do because we're all eventually in the very same boat. Thank you very much.
谢谢这个哈索坦博士这是一个确实全球面对的共同的挑战，需要我们人类共同的智慧来面对。现在我们回到徐月华徐院长，刚才因为声音的原因，再请您分享一下。我们知道您是肿瘤方面的专家，但是作为一个临床医生，也是临床这个健康的管理者，您跟我们分享一下，在这个过程当中，我们在预防、诊断、治疗方面有一些什么样的需求，有些什么样的一些观察和体会。
COVID-19 virus.
听得非常好。
Can you hear me? Hello, everyone online. I am from Guangzhou Zhongshan University Cancer Center. We are a specialty hospital for cancer. We have done a lot of clinical trials on innovative drugs, and we are a key laboratory, national key laboratory. The current topic is an important topic, that is how to prevent coronavirus. Technology is a key in this process. We talked about new drugs and vaccines. My hospital, we have 500 clinical trial protocols underway right now. Every year we have up to 4,000 cancer patients that participate in clinical trials. So we feel that in the development of new drugs such as remdesivir, in China, Dr. Wang Chen, Caobin, they found a negative result. But we see that the sample size in this study did not reach the pre-planned sample size. Afterwards, because there weren't enough patients, the endpoint in this trial is critical. We see results from abroad that show some efficacy. So this result is controversial. But regardless, this clinical trial is incredibly important to decide whether this drug can be used in clinical treatment. So remdesivir is a drug that requires further investigation. So far, we haven't seen detailed reports from the US about their clinical trial. Regarding old drugs, we've already talked about this a lot. When we're using old drugs to new cases, we need evidence. When we are talking about off-label use, we do not suggest widespread use of off-label drugs because we are unsure of the adverse reaction. So how to use these old drugs in a better way is a large challenge for science. People have been talking about chloroquine for a long time, but up till now, there hasn't been a solid prospective clinical trial on this drug. In the US, President Trump's task force has recommended chloroquine, but our evidence is insufficient. Insufficient. So how to better use our drug resources and to develop new drugs, this is very important. And this is currently underway. In the early stages, when we had a lot of patients, the clinical trials were spread too thin. There were too many trials, so resources were not enough for each trial. We were unable to complete the critical pilot trials. So in the future, in public health emergencies, we need government regulation in this area. If we want to control this pandemic, we need to rely on technology, on drugs, and on vaccines. For the science community, this is unavoidable. Only if we have new findings in these two areas will we be able to overcome the pandemic. In terms of prevention in China, as long as we remain vigilant to do testing, it is not that scary. Our hospital stayed open and treated patients throughout from the New Year's to now. We had 20,000 outpatient visits in this time. With their family, the total number will be 50,000. We had 20,000 inpatients. We had 4,000 or 5,000 surgeries, and we didn't have a single infection case. We had a lot of prevention efforts, including collecting epidemiological data and temperature monitoring. If any sign points to possible COVID-19 infection, we had a task force that was on spot at the first time. So we were able to maintain treatment for cancer patients in need.
虽然在很多方向我们在努力过程当中，但是呢，我们在新的环境下、新的情况下呢，持续维持我们正常的业务。同时呢，也在这个过程当中寻找一些新的机会。 跟这相关的话题呢，就是说，在整个疫情期间，因为人员的流动，还有一些互相之间的合作的方式的模式的改变，在一些新的技术，比如说人工智能、互联网技术，在这次疫情的过程当中呢，在新药研发也好，还有说诊断治疗又起到了一些作用。我想听听各位专家在这方面的一些经验吧。店院长，您这边有没有这方面的一些体会？
experience in this field? Would you share with us? You mentioned novel technologies that played an important role in this epidemic. You mentioned artificial intelligence. I would like to share the example of our global drug innovation center. We did two things related to artificial intelligence. One is to use AI language to research literature from the past years about antiviral drugs that are related to coronavirus. We used AI to mine previous research and to help us optimize to find which drugs are more likely to be useful. So this was done using artificial intelligence with big data. In drug development, similarly, regarding proteins or specific targets in COVID-19, we can use computer models to predict potential targets, or to use laboratory research to find the structure, and to use computers to simulate which old drugs may be able to be used on these targets. So these are ways that new computer technology has been able to be used. We have also been collaborating with Aliyun to share these algorithms with other researchers who can research with their perspectives. In another field, in testing in this pandemic, before we had effective drugs, when we were resuming work in China to continuously be able to test for new cases and to understand the immunity status in the population, testing is incredibly important. We saw in this epidemic that various new testing methods were developed. In our institution, a testing that we have been doing, we know that there are two types of molecular testing. One is to test the nucleic acid. The advantages of this is it can be tested in the early stages of infection. In the middle to late stages, there will be antibodies. So another method is to use antigens to test the patient's to test antibodies in the patients. This is a simple method, but it takes some time from infection for antibodies to be produced. So in the early stages, we use nucleic acids, which requires equipment such as PCR equipment and other equipment from, for example, the Abbott company in the US that can do rapid testing in 10-20 minutes, but this requires rather high resources. So our institution developed a easier kit for testing that you can use at home, that you do not need any equipment for testing. It can be done in room temperature and do quick nucleic acid testing. So these novel technologies will be able to be used in new in new places. For example, in developing countries where there are not conditions for widespread use of high-level equipment, this can be useful.
Thank you, Dr. Ding. How about others? How do you feel? What new technologies you have found during this COVID-19 outbreak that can be used in our work and normal life, and also for us to contain the outbreak? Well, in clinical setting, actually, the big data and artificial intelligence have been applied, and also it has been further developed. For example, there are a lot of forms to fill in while doing the information. And now, when using the new technology, we are finding close contacts and possible infectants. And this is thanks to the application of big data. And now we also use online consulting for the follow-up. In the old time, patients need to return to outpatient clinic for follow-up, and now they can use internet medical consultation for the follow-up. So with online consulting, they can have appointment online, and they can even obtain some of the refills online and can be delivered to door, and it would decrease the outpatient clinic visit. This is a great progress. And also we can use MDT, multidisciplinary team cooperation. For example, the 5G technology can be used in the intervention operation where we need very skilled experts. They can use the 5G to guide the whole operation. For example, to how to feel the contrast during the intervention operation, and that's great. And also for clinical research, because we have limited outpatient visit, we can use the internet consultation and use small programs to follow up the patients. And it has exerted great influence in this field. Thank you. I think that's crucial. We have faced with a lot of challenges, and new technology are transforming the way we are running our daily life. During this process, we have all seen that in China, we are making a lot of progress and invest a lot in the new technology development. And in the fight against COVID-19, the researchers, scientists, and healthcare workers in China has done a lot. And I would like to say to our experts that in the fighting against the COVID-19 outbreak, what's the value and opportunity of China's innovation, not only to solve the problem in China, but also to promote the welfare of all humanity. So, what are the opportunities of China's innovation to help the whole world? Let's start from Dr. Jiang. I will go through.
Maybe intervene here.
我简单插入。
I think China has a unique opportunity because you had the infection first, and you have a large group of people who have recovered from this disease. There are many unsolved questions about the long-term consequence of this infection. And you're in a unique position to do that first. How many people, for example, are really immune? We know that not all are, but how many are? How many people have completely cleared the virus? And does it come back? Are any of those people infectious? What are the ways to treat the long-term lung damage that has been sustained by these people? What are we going to do about the other types of disease? The neurological, there are people who have neuropathologies. There's people who have kidney disease. There are people who suffered many clots from the hypercoagulation. You have a unique clinical opportunity to take the whole population and reach some conclusions. I'd say the most important conclusions that China can contribute right now is to what extent are people going to be likely to be protected from this infection? That is the most important question right now, because as everybody goes out into the world, we know that there is some risk. And have you really eliminated all the risk? Even if you have no apparent new transmissions, there are a lot of people who've been infected. And we know from other kinds of viruses that there can be something called persistence of viruses, that they can persist in hidden forms. Even RNA viruses can do that. And I think those are key questions that have to be addressed. The other effort that can be done, and I think it was referred to at the very beginning, is there was a major effort to understand SARS and to develop drugs. The lesson that we've learned is it was a tragedy for the world that some of those drugs weren't brought to human clinical trials and were not stockpiled. I think everybody involved with that understands that had we had a few of those anti-SARS and anti-MERS drugs available in a stockpile, perhaps no more than 10 people in the world had to die. Is it the fault of science? Is it the fault of medicine? Is it the fault of government? Or is it just some human failing that resulted in this terrible pandemic that we had no way to control it in the early days? We now know that many of those chemicals that were developed in China, were developed in Singapore, were developed in Europe, and were developed in the United States would probably stop this disease. And if we had them, we could have stopped it early. And even after it spread, we could have done much better than we're doing now. As we all know, we're desperately trying to use drugs that have already been approved, and they're not working very well. A key factor for an antiviral drug is, does it decrease the viral load? Any of us who worked in the HIV field know that the way those drugs we knew worked very early on is a level of virus dropped in each and every patient that took the drug, until many years later when people were resistant. Do the drugs that are being tried now drop the level of virus in the infected person? If they don't, move on. If they do, move forward. It's a very simple criteria, which is not being used in this case. So there is a deep lesson. We are going to be subject to more coronavirus attacks. No doubt about it. 3 in 20 years. It doesn't take a genius to figure out there'll be a 4th and 5th and 6th. We need those drugs stockpiled, and they have to be broad spectrum drugs. The second thing is, coronaviruses are not the only viruses out there to get us. Why don't we have a good influenza drug? We could, but we don't. We know influenza could kill 1 billion or 2 billion people, yet we don't have a drug to stop it. Why not? It's a failure of science, it's a failure of government, and not of any country around the world. It's a failure. And it's a failure of industry as well. We don't want to have that failure again. So these are lessons I hope we all take to heart and carry forward. And as I am now relearning all my virology, I realize that there are many other viruses out there that could come to get us. If you look at the rhinoviruses, you look at the other enteroviruses, they all have cousins, which cause terrible diseases in human beings at the margin. All it takes is 1 or 2 of those to flip, to become more lethal than they are, because they're already transmissible. It's our responsibility as a biomedical community to survey what dangers are there, to do the drug development that we can, and to encourage each of our governments to support the work, to stockpile the drugs, because they are a number of different viruses that are coming to get us. We can predict where they're going to come, but we have to be prepared, or this will happen again and again and again. And I would just close with one thing. Most governments, wherever they are in the world, don't respond if a few people are going to die, but they do respond if their economy is going to collapse. Each of these epidemics has the potential to collapse an entire economy. In this epidemic, it's collapsed the economy of the world. And we're going to take many years to dig out. It can happen again and again and again if we're not prepared. And that's, I think, a lesson all scientists should take to their respective governments, to say, don't let this happen again. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go back to Dr. Jiang. Please, we can introduce to us several opportunities and values for China's innovation. Okay. Actually, in China, we have made a lot of miracles in the fight against COVID-19. For example, we have sequenced this pathogen, and we have done that within 10 days. And 3 teams, they have done that independently to recreate this pathogen sequence. So this reflects our accumulation for so many years. Because in the SARS outbreak, people say that China missed the chance. SARS was originally discovered in Guangdong province, and only months later, it was sequenced by foreign experts and Hong Kong experts, and we have missed a lot of opportunities. And after decades of development, we have done much better and made much progress regarding this. And that depends mainly on our innovation research and our country's support. For example, one of the team's leader is from the Wuhan Virology Center, Professor Dr. Shi. She has been tracing the bats related virus, and she has been tracing to the original virus origin, and she has recognized the virus very rapidly. And also Dr. Zhang Zhi, she has discovered thousands of new viruses, especially in the RNA virus. He has contributed a lot, and he's also among the 3 teams who deciphered the pathogen. And also, not to mention our national CDC, and yes, that research team has accumulated a lot of experience over these years, and that's why we have made this world miracle. There's never in the case in the world that we can understand a virus, to accumulate that, to sequence that, and also to upload the information of this virus among 10 days. Within 10 days after obtaining the sample, we have uploaded the information of this virus to the gene bank. This is a world miracle. And secondly, domestic experts, they're using existing drugs for off-label use. For example, in Wuhan, within 20 days, they have screened several potentially effective existing drugs, for example, the chloroquine, to put into clinical use. And to find such medicine within 20 days to be put into clinical use and for clinical trial, this is also unprecedented. And also in vaccine development, China is also making miracles. Within 3 months, we have completed the work of what would take other research team years' work. So from the preparation, the immune testings, to the animal model studies, the whole process is very rapid. And our country, we use several teams to work together and simultaneously in different phases, and they're working parallelly for that. And if anything had gone wrong in any of these links, it would be a fail. So this is a great success by all of us, and this great cooperation and organization by the country. And we have altogether 3 vaccinations entering the phase 1 and 2 clinical trial. This is also miraculous. It's unprecedented. And also, I want to speak something about the investment in the innovation research. Hopefully, our country, some foundations or the government can learn from the United States to something like Manhattan Project, so that they can gather talents from all over the country and to give them the best project in the country. And also, they can be funded by pharmaceutical companies or foundations. And we should pull all the forces together instead of working alone. And all over the world, there are a lot of repetitive works. And for a single vaccination, there might be a dozen of companies doing the same thing. So I think the core for success is how we are targeting the virus. For example, the broad neutralizing antibody. But if we are doing, the coronavirus is difficult from the HIV. HIV is very difficult to produce broadly neutralizing antibody. But for coronavirus, it would be more effective to using broad neutralizing antibody. And also, the virus wouldn't produce IgE or THR immune response. So there would be no problem developing vaccines against it. Thank you, Dr. Jiang. He has mentioned in his sharing that about the researchers and scientists from Tsinghua University, they have been making outbreaks. They have been making a lot of breaking through progresses. And thank you for all the scientists. And Dr. Han has mentioned that there are special innovation opportunities here in China. So as the panel one is ended here, and thank you for all experts to share your perspectives in all these topics. And also, thank you for your sharing on how to conduct international collaborations. These opinions are very, very valuable. And I would like to thank all experts again for your expertise and for your sharing. And so this panel is over. Thank you again, and thank you for all the audience. Wish you a happy holiday. Thank you. Thank you again for Professor Wang. Thank you for your moderation. And thank you all the experts on the panel one. They have shared us the hope of new technologies, and they have also called for several efforts to transfer from passive to active efforts in the clinical field. And also we should conduct international collaboration more closely. And also we learned about the environment of putting new technology into translation. So I think that's also a very good topic. This is also the topic of our second panel, how to put the new technology into application. So now we will enter the next panel. So let's welcome the the moderator from our second panel, Mr. Zhou Guolin, the Science and Technology Counselor, also the Consul General of the People's Republic of China in New York. Well, the sharing from the first panel is very insightful and enlightening. I'm Zhou Guolin. I am the Consulate General of the People's Republic of China in New York. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very thrilled to be the moderator of the second panel. We are very happy to have with us altogether 6 panelists. The guests on our second panel includes, I will introduce them very briefly. There are altogether 6 panelists. First is Director Zhou Liping from the Science and Technology Education and International Collaboration Department of Shenzhen Health Commission. Welcome. The second is the Vice President Mao Ying from Shanghai Medical College of Fudan University. The third one is Ding Ren. Ren Hong from the second affiliated hospital of Chongqing Medical University. That's the slide. And our next speaker is Next speaker is Director Shao Zhiming from the Cancer Research Institute of Fudan University. And next is the Vice President Zheng Hongwu from Shenzhen Children's Hospital, and also Mr. Li Tiantian, the founder of Dingxiang Yuan. Altogether, we have 6 panelists.
Our 6 guests will talk about each of their experiences. We hope that today's roundtable, that each of our experts will be able to share their thoughts and produce new ideas. The previous roundtable talked about drugs and technology, especially about China's innovations in the COVID-19 epidemic. Our next discussion will mainly focus on how to fully use these new technologies to promote public health, including in the prevention and control of epidemics like COVID-19, and in the improvement of daily public health. First of all, I would like to briefly introduce application of novel medical technology in the United States. First of all, the Chinese Consulate General in New York, we contacted 8 projects to connect China's top medical teams with US medical teams, so that medical personnel and Chinese citizens and Wuhan citizens in the United States, so that Chinese medical personnel will be able to share valuable experience, this especially in development of vaccines and drugs. The second is telemedicine companies in the US played an important role in this epidemic, especially in contact tracing. That is, using data to track close contacts. So they did this very well. China had China's characteristics in the US. They used this to decrease outpatient numbers. They required hospitalization of severe patients, but milder patients were asked to stay at home. Currently, there are 65,000 deaths in the US. In New York City, they have 170,000 infected cases. And it's still a very sober issue here. I would like to invite our guests to discuss on several topics. The first topic is our previous half. We talked about exciting new developments in technology. So in translation of scientific research results, what is the capacity of translation of these research into public health solutions? I would like to first invite Dr. Zhou and Dr. Ren to share their experience. The first question, Dr. Zhou, we see that the Shenzhen government has done a lot to use new technology to promote public health. Can you share what do you think Shenzhen has done that is leading the entire country that we should,
谢谢参加啊，
what experience should we
非常
learn
荣幸
from?
能有机会来参加这
Thank
个
you,
学习。
Consulate. I
刚刚前面的那个环节呢，各位专家也分享了新冠的科技研发的一些进展。在这个模块，关于新科技在促进公众健康方面的一些举措，也想跟大家分享一下我们深圳的一些体会和做法和体会。对我个人来讲，我觉得科技成果最终要服务于公众健康，我认为3个维度的人群要有获益。第一个，对于普通大众来讲，那科技赋能就是要让群众在健康服务的可及性和便捷性上要获益。对于第2个维度，对于健康服务人员，那科技赋能是希望我们的健康服务人员能够在能力和效率上有所获益。那第3个维度，对于我们健康服务的管理者来讲，科技赋能就要让健康的治理能力和效率上获益。那下面呢，我从3个维度简单说一下深圳的一些做法。在第1个维度，通过科技赋能提升健康服务的可及性和便捷性方面，这一块呢，深圳是一直非常重视智慧医疗的建设。那我们也构建了全市统一的这个智慧医疗体系。在这一次新冠疫情中，这个受到这个疫情的影响，那这个诊疗的服务以及这个疫情疾病的诊治，那我们在这个深圳市的统一的政务服务平台上，开辟了疫情防控的服务专区。市民呢，你通过点击这个快速问诊就可以这个在线问诊进行健康咨询。到目前为止已经累计是200多万次问诊服务。另外呢，我们对这个抗疫新冠在线问诊也提供这个持续24小时的这个不间断服务。并且呢，我们在这个 APP 里面有一个一键直达发热门诊，也就是这个有发热的患者，他可以通过这个早就近的发热门诊，然后根据指引去就诊。同时呢，我们还有一些这个实时查询疫情地图，这个在线医生问诊、在线心理援助等等，这一些呢就保证市民能够足不出户就能够享受到健康服务。那这一块呢，我想首先是应该大众受益。第2个维度，关于提升健康服务能力和效率的这一块，那我们从所有影响公共这个健康的公共服务、公共卫生事件来看，我们在这个流行病学调查、检测诊断、临床诊治、药物疫苗研发等等各个环节都有科技赋能。那我呢也以2个案例来讲一下我们深圳的企业或者是深圳的机构在这方面所做的一些创新。那大家知道，腾讯密营应用于这个肺癌的一些这个诊断、辅助诊断。那在这次新冠当中呢，腾讯密营继续发挥它的人工智能的优势，辅助诊断新冠肺炎，通过 AI 与人工协作的方式，能够快速的提升这个辅助诊断的时间。那这个在腾讯基金会的支持下，搭载的腾讯密营辅助诊断新冠肺炎解决方案跟这个人工智能的 CT 装备结合起来，在支援湖北、武汉的这个新冠的救治中发挥了重要的作用。那第2个案例，这个深圳的企业华大基因在新冠试剂的检测盒以及检测实验室的建设，这个是在国内发挥了主要的作用。目前呢，也在向全球输出检测试剂盒以及检测实验室。那通过这个创新集成形成的这个火眼实验室，它实际上是一个核酸检测的一体化一站式的一个综合解决的方案。那通过这一个呢，已经目前向10个国家和地区输入正在这个已经建设和正在建设40余座火眼实验室，并且呢，在这个基础上，为了快速解决这个有些国家没有生物安全实验室的问题，研发的这个可移动充电式、充气式 PRG 自动实验室，也就是我们叫的这个火眼实验室的气膜板，能够实现一个快速构造、快速搭建。在短期内能够一个大量的量产的一个火眼实验室。大家也看到，就是在昨天，一个万级通量的气膜板实验室在这个哈尔滨建成。那这个实际上这2个例子就是我们疫情催生了一大批，就是这些设备都是我们可能平时有的，但是我们需要通过在结合疫情的需要，我们对它做一些整合式、集成式的开发。那第3个方面呢，在科技赋能提升城市治理能力的方面。 这公共卫生事件，特别是一些重大突发公共卫生事件，对城市治理能力来讲是一个极大的考验。那这个深圳呢是一个特大型城市，在这一次防控中，应该说是经受住了考验。特别是在大数据运用方面，我们觉得应该是形成了比较有特色的一个管理和服务模式。我也举一个案例啊，就是我们通过这个全市统一的这个政务服务平台深圳这个 APP，首先是面向群众防控需要开辟的这个疫情防控服务的专区，另外呢，面向精准防控的需要开发的这个申爱你自主申报系统。这个申报系统呢，实际上就是能够，这个就是我们现在说的，大家通俗叫健康码，这个也是最早在深圳开发，政府部门联合培训公司开发。最开始上线的时候，我们实际上是鼓励群众，去这个有外来的或者是自主不实的，通过这个申报，让我们能够科学精准的提供防控资源和防控教育。那逐步升级呢，把这些系统跟我们卫生的系统跟社区的系统对接，并且关注一些重点人群，能够实现这些人群进入社区、进入厂房、进入学校的时候、进入公交地铁的时候，它可以实现自主的查验。那如果是这个它有一个申小爱，申小爱现身，就说明它是可以快速通行的。如果申小爱隐身，它就需要核查人员的扫码。如果是显示隔离期间呢，就提醒这个人可能他是在隔离的，他应该是要隔离的，就引导当事人回到隔离点。那实际上这样一种独特的亮码方式呢，其实是彰显人文关怀，就是我们用大数据的手段来实现这个人文关怀。后续呢，这个系统也不断的更新，实现的这个包括出院治愈啊、检出隔离有一些证明呐，以及这个入境人员的申报等等。就是这个例子，实际上我们就想科技赋能，是我们用大数据的手段，用科技的手段，把我们的资源整合的这些资源为群众服务，实现我们便捷高效的城市治理。我想上面呢就是我从3个维度简单介绍一下深圳在运用新科技提升公众健康治理方面的一些具体的举措。谢谢参赞。
Thank you, Dr. Zhou. Your 3 dimensions are incredibly important. Using technology to improve access, efficiency, and governance is very inspiring to us all. Next, please welcome Dr. Zhen. We know that Dr. Zhen has led the construction of a smart hospital program in the 2nd affiliated hospital of Chongqing Medical University. Can you share your perspectives on the application and translation of new technology into clinical work? Thank you, Mr. Zhou. I'm very happy to join this roundtable meeting. I was here for the first session. These scientists, I was very inspired by them because in order to control a virus, we need to rely on technology. Ms. Zhou mentioned using technology to serve the city and to serve health in 3 different dimensions that Shenzhen did. For us, we are only one hospital, a teaching hospital. Developing technology is also important for us. The establishment of smart hospitals is something that the whole country is doing. In Chongqing City, they had requirements for all hospitals in Chongqing. But our hospital, we are a little bit ahead of the rest of the hospitals. In this current epidemic, we found that smart hospitals was indeed very helpful because we had a lot of new technology already in place. Our hospital has a long history. We have about 130 years. So reinventing an old hospital is very difficult. We have a new hospital site where it was easier to establish the smart hospital. Because when we were building the hospital, we considered innovative IT technology. So first of all, there's something that everyone can do, that is to better use technology, to use smart technology to provide services with higher efficiency. This is something that most hospitals can achieve. The second level is something that truly implements smart technology in clinical work. This is something that hospitals are trying to do. For example, in diagnostics, for example, radiology in CT and MRI, how can we improve the diagnostic abilities of hospitals? For example, in a lung mass, in a technology method, we are able to analyze tens of thousands of data points. Also, we mentioned MDT in the treatment of coronavirus, where each team has been emphasizing MDT. This also requires using smart technology. This is something that in the future each hospital will be trying to overcome. The next level, a more comprehensive level of smart hospital, is to better use our big data. In our hospital, we have 130 years. We have a lot of data. If we really have data of one hospital or 10 hospitals or an entire area or the entire country or the entire world, especially for rare diseases, this big data, how we can use this in our clinical diagnostics and treatments, this is something that a smart hospital needs to solve. So from the point of view of the hospital, these three levels of smart hospital establishment are what I have seen. So as an example, we sent several teams to Wuhan and Xiaogan. Two of our teams were about a dozen people. They reached Hubei People's Hospital and they were in charge of a ward. Their team relied on not only their own personal experience to solve the issue of severe patients, they also relied on a large team from our hospital, including infectious disease specialists, cardio specialists, other specialists who are supporting them. This relied on technology. Mr. Zhou mentioned how the US is using technology. For us, we have 16 teams that are currently abroad. Almost every week, we have teams that are collaborating and communicating about the new COVID-19 virus. Whenever we have a difficult patient, we use telemedicine to better discuss their treatment. So smart hospital is a direction for development in the future. Thank you, Dr. Ren.
To provide more precisional clinical treatment and also more effective application of big data. They have shared a lot about their practice. And now, Dean Mao Ying, he's not only an expert, he also an expert in our leader in our hospital. Especially you have led the functional image navigation technology, which has improved the resection rate of gliomas and prolonged the survival time of glioma patients. They've also won the second prize of National Science and Technology Progress many times. I would like to ask you to talk about our effective practice in promoting the innovation and support the transformation from the physicians, from the perspective
好，
of
谢谢周
hospital
参赞，
management.
各位同道，
Well,
晚
thank
上
you,
好。那么
Mr.
如
Zhou.
果说我们
Good
从
evening,
临床的
colleagues
角度来
and
怎么来
audience.
判断这
So
个
from the
科研
clinical
的转化
perspective,
的，我想我
how
们
do
现
we
在在
promote
医
the
学上面
translation of
主
the
要围
technology?
绕着2个问题，
Well,
一个是
in
规
medicine
范，
field,
一个是
there are
创新。
two
但实际上
questions.
在
One
我们
is
大部分
the
的时候，我们大家
standardized
都说的 guideline， 它就
standardization.
是一种
The
规
other
范。
thing is
我们在
innovation.
临床的
As
实
we all
践
know,
工作当中，
guideline is
需
a
要每一个人都要
standardization.
做规范。
So in the
但
clinical
同时规
practice,
范的
we
时候呢，
need
我们
guidelines
又
to
需
guide
要
us.
呢，是
But
要
at
不
the
断的进
same
行发
time,
展，
we
螺
need
旋式
to
上升，
do
形成创新。
development and
所以
to
在规范和创
create
新之间，
innovations.
应该来说
So
它是
among
相互连
between the
接，但同时
standardized
又是
and the
比较复杂的
standardization
一个
and
密切的一个
innovation,
关
we
系。
have to
从这个
link
角度
them
上来
all,
说，
and they
我
are
们在这个里面，如
interacting
果
with
是要
each
打破
other.
这样的一个环节，
So
能够
if
有
we
更
are
好的东西
to
出来， 我觉得我们在医
improve
学
the
上面主要
interaction
的还是
between the
靠
two
临床
in the
试验。
medicine
那么
field,
临床试
we
验就
needed
是
to
在
do
我
more
们目前
clinical
上海医
trials
学
and
院，就复
clinical
旦大学
study.
上海医学院，
So
我
in
们
the
现在考虑的就
Shanghai
是说，在
Medical
临床
School
上要有
attached
所
to
创
Fudan
新，
University,
必然要建成
we
大
want
型
to
的临床
improve
试
the
验中
clinical
心。
innovation.
那么
We
这个
want
不
to
单单是医院
establish
里的临床中心，
large-scale
更要紧的
clinical
是在
medicine
医学
research
院的层面
center,
上
not
建成一个
only
比
in the
较平
hospital
整的、
level,
比
but
较
also
大的一个
to
平台，
in,
把
to
所有的临床
include
医学研
the
究中心把它放在
medical
一起进行
school
临床试
and
验。
to
这个
put
是
large
能够
centers,
充
large
分的
clinical
体现
centers
我们
together
中
to
国
do
的
clinical
医学科
research.
研水
And
平的
this
一个
can
重要的一个
reflect
发展
our
方向。那么在这
medical
个方
science
面，我们做了
development
很多的工
level.
作。那么
From
我们
this
也是知道，
perspective,
在这
we
里
have
面
done
还
a
存
lot
在
of
着很多的
work,
难点。
and we
比
are
如说，我
also
们现在
met
很大的一
with
个难
multiple
点就是说，
challenges.
在
For
国内
example,
和
one of the
国外
difficulties
围绕着临
is
床
that
试验上
in
面，
domestic
我们
or
还是有很大
international
的壁垒
field,
在里
we
面。
have
尤
a
其是在
barrier
现
on
在
the
的环
clinical
境下面，
trials
我们
and
可
the
能
clinical
更难的
research.
进行一个
Especially
以
under
全球性
current
的临床
environment,
试验
it's very
来
hard
作为
to
我们
conduct
为全人
large-scale
类服务的
international
一个这样的一
multi-center
个
study
平台，
to
要
serve the
建立
all
起来
human
是非
beings.
常困
And
难的。
this
所以
platform
我们
will be
想的
difficult
就
to
是希望能够在
establish. So
上海地区
we
和
think
全
that
国的地方
it's
能够
better
建立
to
起一个
establish a
规范化的临
large-scale
床试验中心，
and
为我们的科
standardized
研创新
clinical
能
research
够打下
standard
非常好
and
的
to
基
lay
础。
the
这个也
foundation
是我们
for
目
the
前
clinical
在着力
research
打造的一
in the
个工
medical
作。
field.
而且我们
This
可以
is
看到，在
also
上海
our
很
focus.
多的医院
And you
都
can
有
see that in
100张
Shanghai,
到500张不等
many
的临床
hospitals,
试
they
验的
would
床位。
have
那么这些床
100
位
or
完全就是为我们
150
新的器
medical
械、
beds
新的药
dedicated
物、
to
新的
clinical
治疗方法
trials,
的开展提
dedicated
供新的
for
帮助。
new
我想我们
medication
将来
and
随着这样的一个
vaccination
情况的发
development.
展，我们的临
So
床试
with
验
that
的水平，
development,
我们
I do
将来的
believe
医学
that
水
the
平是
level
会
and
发展很高的。
the
当然，
development
刚
in
刚
the
就是
medical
讲到这
field
个问
will be
题，
very
我们还
rapid.
有讲到的就是说，我
And
们叫产研
regarding
结
this
合。我
question,
们每
we
次都在
need
说
to
产研结合，
combine the
实际
production
产业结
and
合
the
当中最
research.
要紧的一
How to
条，就是
combine
我们
the
是
crucial link
由
is
产
that
来
we
推动我
need
们的
to
医疗，
use
还是我们的
production
医
to
疗去
promote
推动
the
产？
medical
这个实际
research
上是一
and
个很
also
困难的
vice
问题。
versa.
我
This is
个
a
人
very
觉得，
difficult
在目
question,
前情况
which
下，
takes the
以
lead.
临
So
床的
under
问题
current
为导向，
circumstances,
去
we need
寻
to
找
be
产
clinical
研之间的一个密
problem-based
切
and
结合，
to seek
把
the
医生也
close
放
link
到
between
研
the
究和
production,
产业当中去，
clinical
最后呢，
production
再由
and
产
the
业到
research.
临床进行临床
We
试
need
验，
to
形成一个
go
闭环。
back and
这样的
forth
话，对
and
我
to
们的这
form a
个
closed
产业的结
cycle
合和产
so
业的
that
转化
you will be
会提供 供非常大的帮助。在这个里面有一个非常好的例子，就是我们现在国家的联营的核磁共振，它在研究的过程当中就直接放到了医院。我们在研究的过程当中，医生直接给他提出问题，然后呢，对他的那个临床的那个软件进行一个更新，进行修改。这样的话，为将来的它的发展就提供了一个很大的帮助。我想第3点还有一个要紧的就是说，如果是要把临床医学转化，鼓励医生的积极性的话，就是要让医生得到最大的实惠。所以我们在目前情况下，在上海、在复旦上海医学院和在我们各个附属医院当中，我们以往就是说我们专利转化70%是归医院的。
transformation of a patent, 70% was to the hospital, and only 30% is to the individual. Now we have reversed the ratio. Now the individual takes 70% of the patent transformation remunerations, and the hospital only takes 30%. And this is a great promotive incentive mechanism for the physicians to make innovations. And each hospitals, no matter in Shenzhen, Beijing, or Shanghai City, they are doing very well to encourage them to do so. And I do believe in the future we would make more progresses, and we will lead the progression internationally. Thank you. Thank you. I think you have talked about 3 aspects. First is how to do the innovation and standard engaged with standardization. And second is the production, relationship with innovation. And the third is how do we do the encourage mechanism within the hospital for physicians innovation. And now we move on to Professor Chen Zhimin. You are famous experts in the breast cancer treatment here in China. And the breast cancer is a very important disease burden that threatens the health and the life of many women, not only domestically, but also in the world. Please talk about the opportunities and the challenges that we are using to reduce the burden of this disease and improve the quality of life. And what are challenges of using new technology? Thank you very much. I'm very honored to join this panel, and I've learned a lot. And also, from the first panel, I learned a lot about the development of COVID-19 treatment targets. And I would like to introduce several specific examples. For example, I'm in the study of breast cancer. Doing this for more than 30 years, I have very deep understanding of breast cancer and accumulated a lot. In this era of new technology innovation, how do we use new technology and innovation to better serve our patients? I have experience and understanding of that. So breast cancer is a malignancy in women, and it has a high prevalence in large cities in China. It has an increasing incidence, and the treatment efficacy of it is also evolving with the time. For example, we have issued, we have published a clinical trial regarding 80,000 breast cancer patients. And in our hospital, the Fudan Cancer Hospital, our 5-year survival rate has reached nearly 90%. So this is one of the disease. Most of the patients has great outcomes, and our level of treatment can compare to European drugs. And this with applications and for us, undoubtedly, the breast cancer can be categorized as chronic disease now. So that's also how we link public health and cancer. And I do appreciate Ding Ren's talk about how the AI, how the intelligence medicine can play a role in cancer treatment. From my perspective, it's mainly used in 2 links. First is how do we manage these patients? For example, how do we manage patients from the time they enter our clinic and to the operation, to the follow-up, to the adjunctive therapy, and to the later follow-up? This needs big data. This means technology innovation. We have to connect them together. Because breast cancer is a chronic disease, it can have a remission 5 years later, or 10 years later, or 20 years later. So we have to manage this patient systemically. And also, intelligence medicine can play a role in this setting to link each processes and to do very good follow-up and long-term treatment, and also to early screening relapse for the patients. It's very important. And also, secondly, from the diagnosis, treatment, and new treatment application, the intelligence medicine can also play a very important role. For example, it's a very simple example. How do we improve the efficacy of the treatment? For example, and how to do early screening. If we can discover breast cancer in early phases, the treatment will be simple and the cost is low, and we wouldn't be needing operations. And how are the new technology playing this part? First, we have to identify high-risk patients. How do we do that? We can test the genes, we can test for DNAs, so that we can discover high-risk patients. After screening these high-risk patients, we can use new imaging technologies or other technology to discover the malignancy. If we discover that, they will be having a very good clinical outcome and very low mortality. And that's a very crucial part. But if we cannot discover that in early phases, how do we do? We can use new drugs in the clinical setting, new operation technologies, and new treating modalities, which will improve the survival rate of the patient. And Ding Mao has also mentioned that how this clinical trial contributes to the clinical innovations. How do we do that? We need to use clinical trials, clinical studies to apply new drugs and new technologies onto our patients with the form of clinical trials, and we have to optimize our treatment and to promote this optimization. I do agree with Dr. Mao that standardization and innovation works together, and in large medical centers like us, like our oncology hospital, we have nearly 7,000 patients for breast cancer each year. We need to constantly use clinical trials to reach the conclusion of a new technology application and to use that into new treatment of patients. So I think the new technology is a very crucial thing in having better clinical outcome, and it has helped promote the treatment of cancer patients. That's my point. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Shao, you have discussed new technology with the treatment of breast cancer. How the new technology is playing a part in the treatment and management of breast cancer patients, especially how to connect with public health and how to manage the chronically ill patient. And it can also help with the higher treatment efficacy, and also how the new technology is playing a role in this whole process. And this is also the direction of your effort. Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to our second big question. Second topic. This is how we empower new technology. How do we use new technology to empower them to treat our patients and to manage public health? So the next question is how to make these innovation services and products benefit our patients and also the public to the greatest extent so that they can realize their values. So next, I would like to invite Ding Zhenghongwu and Chairman Li Tiantian to talk about your views from the perspective of improving accessibility. First of all, I would like to invite Dr. Zeng. You have visited the Harvard University about improving the hospital management and the safe quality informatization. Can you introduce some of your newest practice in the application of the technology and how you are using this new technology, service and product to improve the accessibility? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zhou. Councillor Zhou, I would like to answer your first question first. How do we apply new technologies in our hospital? I would like to introduce some examples. For example, we are establishing a platform and also we're establishing some pools for specialized disease. And we need to pull together the imaging, pathology, clinical, and treatment information. We pull this information together so that we can further the clinical study and uh, uh, to make up for the weak link in this technology. And as Dr. Xu has mentioned, they have a lot of patients in the hospital, and now we are trying to build a large platform for it. We have started, and we have been making some progresses. And secondly, is we are establishing a hybrid operation that's used for cardiology patients. They're receiving internal and surgical cardiology treatment. And we combine the interventional study with the imaging study and operation so as to decrease the patient's times of operation and decrease the complication and risks. And the new technology does not necessarily mean new progress. We have been using new technologies as simulation training courses for our staff. This simulation system is that we use simulation practices first to train our staff, and then they can move on to the patient. For example, the laparoscopy. First, they can use the device for simulation, and later they can use it on the patient, especially for pediatric patients. They have higher requirements for the technology. And also, we are trying to outlay another program about PET MRI. For example, Dr. Mao and Dr. Shao, you are in the oncology field. You may be familiar with this technology. PET MRI supposes emission of neutrons with MRI. It can interact with the soft tissue images. It can integrate these together and does not have the CT's dose of radiation, so that we can use this PET MRI for pediatric patients, and instead of giving them PET CT. And this is also gets the support from our development and reform commission and health commission. Apart from the good devices, we also need very good staffs. For example, we can collaborate with Professor Liang from Guangdong province. He's also professor from the Guangdong University, and we are trying to cultivate talents to study this technology, and we are also applying for national programs so that in this progress probably we can cultivate some more talents and also to serve our pediatric patients. And we have seen much progress in that to solve some urgent clinical demands, and we are also cultivating a lot of talents. And for the second question from Councillor Zhou, how do we improve the patient accessibility? I think accessibility is to how do the patients obtain and how do we improve the efficiency. First of all, I would like to talk about the safety. No matter if technology or service, I think we have to do no harm. This is the principle. And also in this field, we need to avoid the revealing of privacies. We have to make our operations very user-friendly, and we want to flatten the learning curve. And also, we want the device, new technology to be accurate. In this new era, the AI or the artificial intelligence, it has self-learning and self-correcting functions. This is very good for precision. The fourth is affordable. When the new technology firstly emerged, it's expensive. And also, but after quantitative productivity, the cost would decrease and be more affordable. The fifth is portable and enduring. And also, from a larger perspective, we should use big data, because big data is not only evaluating existing technology, it will later bridge our patient case file, and it will do further analysis. So I think the market is guaranteed. Thank you, Councillor Zhou. Thank you, Ding Zeng. You have used your examples from Shenzhen Children's Hospital to introduce your hybrid operation room, as well as your how do you cultivate the talents. And also you have talked about the new technologies, safety, accurateness, and portable affordability, and also big data risks. You have integrated all these aspects in the new technologies.
Next, let us welcome Chairman Li. Chairman Li is one of the earliest innovators and practitioners of medical informatization. Their corporation built a bridge between doctors and patients. They have a large user base of doctors and patients. What are your latest observations and thoughts on how to use new technology to better provide services and improve access? Let us welcome Chairman Li. Thank you, Councillor Zhou. Good evening. I am Li Tiantian from Dingxiangyuan. Before this startup, I was a neurologist, so I was systematically trained in clinical medicine and research. In response to Councillor Zhou's questions, I want to first talk about my understanding of accessibility. Accessibility, the root word for this is access. Access means being able to enter, being able to reach, and being able to have. So I think the first point of technology is accessibility. It needs to be accessible to the large mass population. This was highlighted in the epidemic. Usually, when our hospitals are running, our patients can have their questions answered by going to hospitals. But during the epidemic, we see many services closing. So the public lacks a means to access information. So the internet plays an important role to share information. Dingxiangyuan was at first a platform for doctors. 6 years ago, we started services for the public. We had an epidemic map, the first epidemic map in the entire world. Later, the Johns Hopkins data that they used, especially in the earlier stages, their data was all from our data. So we were thinking that using such a map to allow people to quickly access such information online, to see how the disease develops, to see information on how the virus develops. This will achieve accessibility with very low input. So in the past 3 months, we have tens of billions of pins on our map. So technology must be accessible. The second need for technology is to be understandable. This means, for example, if we give someone who doesn't read, if we give them an English paper, it is accessible, but this person cannot read English. So this information is useless to them. So we need to not only provide accessibility to broadcast information, but we also need to make this information understandable. For example, during the epidemic, we started talking about airborne transmissions, talk about fecal-oral transmissions, and started talking about how to deal with waste management at homes. So I went home to study epidemiology and biostatistics textbooks. This kind of public health information is difficult for the public to understand. As doctors, the amount of public health knowledge we have is also limited. So how to better provide this difficult scientific information in a way that other people can understand. This is something that we have been doing. In the past 3 months, we provided 3,600 short online passages or videos to educate the public to better understand novel innovations across the world, to better understand what our leaders are saying. We used a language that the public can understand. These passages had, again, tens of billions of times that people read them. So for Jingxiangyuan, this was the first time we had such large traffic. The third characteristics that technology needs to have is affordability. In such large emergencies, we need to ensure that accessing information and services does not increase economic burden of the population. So all of the solutions that we provide have to be cheap or free. It cannot be economic. For example, online consultation during the epidemic. Previously, all of our consultation was for profit, but during the epidemic, we provided free consultation for Hubei province. For other provinces, we provided services with the lowest cost as possible in order to maintain our platform, but also allow the masses to access services in a very affordable or even free manner. We had 1.2 million people use our online services. So in our model that is accessible and understandable and affordable, we were able to improve access of novel technology. We were able to reach a lot of people. One interesting finding while we were doing this is that we found an online multi-tiered diagnostic and treatment system. We see in other countries that have a well-established GP system, China is also pushing this system to allow people to be able to treat simple diseases within the communities, but only to go to Beijing and Shanghai for difficult diseases. Online, we saw that the data that we provided, we saw a lot of people accessing this information, but there were only 1 million people who were using consultation services. This is a large gap. Why is this gap present? Because educational data provided a hierarchical system. We were able to answer questions that people are most interested in through these methods. If people access this information in these ways, they no longer worry. If people who have individualized questions that need further answering, they can move on to the second step, that is online consultation. So this method, we were able to block the traffic in the first step if we didn't do this, if we only provided online consultation, even if all of the doctors in the entire country are answering questions online, they will not be able to answer all of their questions. So this way, we were able to decrease the difficulties for public to understand information, and we were also to assist in resolving the problem of lack of medical services during the epidemic. So this is interesting, and these are some points that we should think about. Thank you, Director Lee. You gave a very clear description of accessibility. It needs to be accessible, it needs to be understandable, and it needs to be affordable. These are very critical aspects. I remember someone who said, your platform says to make yourself heard, make yourself understood. I think this is applicable to your case. We need for the people to hear you, to understand you, and to trust you. Now, it is now 8:20. We only have 10 minutes left, and we still have one topic. So I wish, after giving out this topic, to give each of you 1 or 2 minutes, and at the end to leave me 1 or 2 minutes. You gave a very good, each of our experts gave very good insights on innovations in each of your areas of specialties. The previous roundtable also talked about how the COVID-19 epidemic accelerated in technology. How should we use this opportunity? I would like to invite our 6 experts to share their experience on this topic. Please welcome, respectively, Director Zhou, Dean Ren, Dr. Mao, Dr. Shao, Dr. Zeng, and Chairman Lee. First, please welcome Director Zhou. Are you here, Director Zhou?
好了，不好意思，谢谢参战。好，谢谢参战。这个创新是无处不在，机遇也是无处不在。但是我觉得影响健康的这种重大突发公共卫生事件，也许是10几年、几10年不遇的。但是这种机遇一定是催生新生态的，包括医疗服务的生态、学术的生态、健康生活的生态等等。而科技呢，一定是改变这些生态的核心驱动力。那其中呢，人工智能和远程虚拟的模式将深度的融入我们的工作、生活和生产中。对于这些，我觉得技术不是问题，问题是规则、规范和融合。规则也就是我们需要建立与国际接轨的科技研发转化的规则，国际合作的规则。规范，那我们需要建立科学的技术规范、伦理规范和临床研究的规范等等。而融合呢，是我们需要不同领域技术的融合、人才的融合、模式的融合。那因此，我们说把握机遇，从卫生健康领域，我们必须围绕这3个核心去做储备，这种储备包括能力的储备，比如说我们快速诊断能力的储备、重症救治能力的储备，人才的储备，包括我们流行病建模分析的人才、流行病调查的人才的储备，机构的储备，包括我们快速检测设备以及试剂研发机构的储备、P3实验室的储备，制度的储备，包括我们紧急科研攻关协调机制。我们的疫苗研发和药物研发的协调机制等等，这个是我觉得我们应该做的储备。这个我们面对机遇，我们应该做的准备。谢谢。
We need to prepare for in the face of challenges. Dr. Ren, I think to answer your question, first of all, a good hospital must be a research hospital. A good doctor must be also a researcher as well as a doctor. We will not hire a doctor who cannot do surgeries, but we also do not like people who only do surgeries but do not do research. Clinical work and clinical research, we have many ways to use new technology, one of which is clinical trials. But more importantly, I think real-world studies in clinical work is everywhere. If we are better able to use our data, to use MVT teams, to use our standardized protocols, we will be able to generate truly good clinical research that is useful for our clinical work. As an infectious disease doctor, I saw we all saw the development of the COVID-19 virus in China. We had very successful identification of the genetic sequence. We have a good testing diagnostic kits. But however, our treatments in clinical research in this current epidemic, we saw many shortcomings. We are hoping that the vaccine will be able to contribute to public health.
那个通过这一次，我感觉到我更加深刻体会到这个世界是平的。然后我们的医疗事业的发展，从我们的医学研究，它不是我们医生的事，不单单是医生的事，也不单单是公卫的事，更主要的是全社会的事。所以我想通过这一次的情况以后，我们抓住的机遇就是我们要有这样的一个叫 One Health 的理念，我们要把所有的人都融合到我们这个医疗事业当中来，甚至就是说，你看这次就是把海关也要放进来，把物流也要放进来，把大数据也要放进来，把所有的人放进来。就是说，这个现在给我们的抓住这个机遇，就是我们把健康不是我们医学的事，是整个社会的事，这个概念要把它提出来。第二个，我觉得在整个过程当中，我们可以看到，从事医学事业的人，他从临床、从公卫这些角度发现了很多实际问题。所以，我想我们将来的这些科学研究要关口前移，我们要把这些临床和公卫的这些问题，这些医生和公共卫生人员要首先一开始的时候就带动到产业当中来，让他跟产业的人进行无缝的对接，而不是等将来我们通常所说的从 bench 到 bedside。我们现在应该是从 bedside 到 bench， 同时又回到到 bedside， 所以这是我的一个感觉到我的一个体会。谢谢。
好，那个谢谢啊，确实是这样一个公共卫生的事件，对于我们这一次整个对于我们医疗系统的话是一个应该是一个非常大的一个考验，对于我们不管是你做什么医疗那个临床的，比如说我们是做肿瘤的，比如别人是做胃肠的、消化道的等等，都带来非常大的挑战。当然，在挑战当中的话呢，肯定是有很多的一些机遇。如何来面对，在我们日常工作当中应对这些突发的公共卫生事件的话，其实这一次的话呢，给了我们，不管是给了我们也好，给了我们全国的医疗工作者来好，都是一个非常大的考验和机遇。所以在以后的话呢，我们觉得在整个一个过程当中，怎么来在医疗的过程当中，怎么来考虑到我们突发事件随时可能会发生，我们要面临一个非常好需要很好的思考，要学会在这种突发事件当中能够把我们的病人给处理好。我觉得这是一个非常大的一个启示。谢谢大家。
Welcome, Dr. Sun. I have one point that is challenge opportunities for using new innovation. First of all, we need to be aware of new technology. Secondly, we need to work with other sectors. The third is to be able to push for innovations ahead of our time. Welcome, Chairman Lee. As a person in the healthcare industry, we have a larger pressures to survive compared to large hospitals. So we are very aware of opportunities. A direct we see that healthcare is a very large industry. Ding Xiangyuan, as one department in this industry, we are focusing on health instead of treatment. But health is different from disease. Health talks about lifestyles, about things that happen in our daily lives. These issues also need professionals to answer, but people haven't been doing this before. Our healthcare system has been treating diseases and not promoting health. In Healthy China 2030, we need to move from a disease-centered approach to a health-centered approach. So Ding Xiangyuan has been working in the health sector. And we also agree with the One Health idea. We are moving in this direction and hope to collaborate more with you in the future. Thank you to our 6 experts for sharing, to giving explanations from each of your backgrounds. As today's moderator, I'm very grateful. I want to give a few conclusions. First of all, a scholar talked about 4 revolutions. The first one is in Qin Shi Huang. The second is in the Sui Tang dynasty. The third is in technology revolution in Ming dynasty that promoted economic development. And the fourth is starting from 1978. We want to use technology to promote economy and to further promote culture. Secondly, my background is in technology. So you know I am the consulate for science and technology. Starting from 2015, we have been pushing legalization. We have been pushing laws for technology. This was put forth in 2018 and 19 to improve the payments for scientific personnel and to promote translation. Thirdly, specifically in regard to healthcare and public health, the 6 of you gave 6 different ideas. The first, we need to have regulations. The second is to have research as well as clinical work. The third is to incorporate the entire public. The fourth is to have a preparedness mechanism for emergency. The fifth is to stay ahead of the times. And the sixth is to have targeted approaches. I'm very happy to moderate the session. I am not a healthcare personnel, but I'm very grateful for all of your exciting talks. And thank you to our platform, to Dr. Liu Da, and to our workers in the background. I'm sure this session has given a lot of inspiration to our listeners. And I hope that this platform will continue to provide knowledge and wisdom for more people in the future. Thank you to all of you.
谢谢参战，谢谢各位参会的嘉宾。
Thank you.
谢谢。
Thank you, Consulate Zhou, for a very good modulation section. Thank you to all of our experts. And we would also like to thank all of our experts that participated today. We are sure that scientific innovation will promote the continued improvement of healthcare services to increase accessibility. Our talk seminar is ending right now. Next week, we will begin a new module, including 4 sessions and 1 discussion. We will talk about humanitarian mechanism in healthcare. Thank you, everyone.
谢谢。
Goodbye.
健康中国国际公共卫生管理培训项目今天正式启